email? What does it mean?
Communication is the imparting or exchanging of information or news.
The single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place.
Conversation is the oral exchange of sentiments, observations, opinions, or ideas.
Forbes Books Radio presents The Conversation with Clinton M. Padgett.
Welcome back to part 2 of my conversation with Shane Snow, award-winning journalist, entrepreneur, and best-selling author of Dream Teams, Working Together Without Falling Apart. We pick up the conversation with Shane talking about driving innovation through what he calls cognitive friction, which is the conflict of ideas, not people.
This was one of the big, we almost named the book Cognitive Friction or, Productive Conflict, because this is, I think, the main thing that just doesn't happen on teams that have all the potential. You have all the ingredients, you have the different heads thinking about things, you have the players who have the abilities, but you don't quite get there. And it's, an analogy that I use a lot is you're baking a cake. You're not going to bake a cake if you have 8 different types of flour, but if you get all the different ingredients, eggs and flour and chocolate and milk and, all that, you're still not going to get cake if you don't mix the ingredients together. And that's what this cognitive friction is about, is it's mixing our different ways of thinking together, combining our ideas and having that intellectual battle out in order to make something better than just eggs and milk. And the thing that gets really hard about this is precisely what we were just talking about, is when things get personal, when it becomes about you, your ego, or your group defending your position, you being right or you not being wrong, or, in a disagreement or a debate, it can be about, proving you're better than the other person or destroying the other person or just proving you're right. That gets in the way. If we're going to be kind of practical about it, who is right doesn't matter at all. What matters is what is right. What is the right, what idea wins, not whose idea won. Shouldn't matter. And yet that's where things are wrong. So if you can create a environment or dynamic where you can go hard on the debate or the argument or the disagreement, you can actually talk it through and explore it. And even if it gets, hard, I guess, really hard, if you can do that without it turning into, I don't like you anymore because of this conversation, then that's where the magic happens. And so what are the ways that you can do that? There's various ways, but I think it's largely it's like a lifelong journey of maturity and wisdom thing for individuals. And for leaders, it's a leadership issue. It's recognizing when human beings naturally get to the place where they're starting to take things personal, or if you're starting to get angry, it means you care, but it might mean, if you're getting angry, that you're caring about how you look, or being right or not being wrong, or, your credibility, and learning to spot those signs as they happen and then taking the pressure away. Often it's, hey, let's take a break. Let's have some one-on-one conversations. Let's get back at it. Or it's, dropping as a leader the little things that you need in order to let that person feel okay. Let their ego be satisfied. Like, hey, what you said there, everyone pay attention. This is really valuable because this is pushing our thinking. Now, that's not the idea that's going to work, but this is the idea that's going to get us to that next idea. So thank you. Like that kind of acknowledgement to redirect it from the sort of defensiveness or all of that. I'm talking specifically about, arguments and debates, but there's this thing that I now notice, and then I encourage people and leaders to notice, which is when you see a disagreement, notice when people start to try to prove that they're right versus, and when that happens, that's when you can jump in, or when people are disagreeing and trying to learn and trying to get things to that place of trying to learn is where the magic happens. But I notice this in my own work. When a disagreement happens, I will notice, okay, it's a disagreement, and I will say things like, hey, let's explore that, to sort of reset the mood from no, who's right or who's wrong, or one person is sort of, hammering the other or talking too much. I would actually like to hear what the other side of this is. Can we explore that? So turning it into that kind of group mountain climb. So yeah, that's the knowing that once again, back to what I was saying, knowing that that's how it works, that conflict helps us to see the things that we won't see on our own, and exploring ideas that are different helps us to get places that we wouldn't have got to on our own. But that when things get personal is when that falls apart. Just knowing that that's how it is means that we can start to approach or inject ourselves into conflict in ways that can sort of tweak it so that it is more about exploring.
I was on a project in Silicon Valley for a semiconductor company a few years back, and as a facilitator, you're trying to drive the conversation or facilitate the session, and these two engineers were just nose to nose going at it. I mean, and I'm listening, and I thought, I think they're saying the same thing, but they're just so they're so anti each other at this moment. So I finally got in and I said, hold on. So you're saying this, right? And you're saying that, right? You're saying the same thing, just using different words. And so it took them a minute, but they finally de-escalated down. Okay. But if I don't know where it would have ended if I hadn't jumped in the middle, because they were fighting the same point, but they were just head to head, and sometimes you have to jump in and de-escalate things.
Yeah. I mean, I would believe that you're having, read some of your work, and I would believe you're a master at this, that's exactly, it's totally normal. Like, I don't fault either of those engineers for getting into it like that. A lot of times the conflict we have is really about terminology and perspective, not about like the right thing to do. And when you can get rid of that, then you can be on the same team again and keep moving forward. I think also, in those moments, it pays to point out, especially when things have calmed down, it's like we are saying the same thing, it pays to point out like, hey, that's why we value both of you guys, right?
Yeah.
You have different perspectives, and you're coming at this from different angles, which is exactly what's going to get us further than if you both thought the same. Like, that'd be awful if you both thought the same. And we are on the same page now. Great. So let's use that energy to keep moving forward. And I mean, I think, more than anything, I don't deal with engineers as much as you. So I think the way that you frame that will either be not pedantic or they'll roll their eyes, and they might roll their eyes at me. But if you know your audience, you'll say it in the right way.
Yeah.
When other people observe you do that, you jump in to help mediate that and get people to see, eye to eye. And then when you express that what is there, those different ingredients are valuable, when other people see that, it's going to make them more likely to behave in these ways that are productive as well. And to see you as someone they can trust, as their leader, of like, hey, this guy is not concerned with playing favorites, or, he's actually trying to make everyone better and help everyone save face and know that they're valued. It's such a huge part of the battle, I think.
Yeah, in that example, it was just two engineers that had the same thought, but they were just so engaged in the moment that they were angry with each other. But using my facilitation skills are in translating between engineering and marketing, because their languages are so different. And so you have to kind of translate for them. But, what you talk about high-performing teams. So what are some of you think the biggest misconceptions leaders have about building a high-performing team? Because I think about, and I don't want to always go back to the sports analogies, but you have the dream team where I think back in Miami in the day, they had the big three, one of which was Chris Bosh, who went to college where I went to college. But those teams they did win a championship. You don't have five superstars typically on one team and they're going to win, right? So what do you think? What are the misconceptions? Is it I got to get a superstar on each position, or I need one superstar, or how does that? What do you think? And just don't talk about sports. Just talk about a team. You're building a team to do what you do. Because in the book, you talk about a company you had started, and there was a footnote that said kind of the biggest problems we ran into was people working together or something like that. So
yeah. Okay, so there's several misconceptions. I'll talk about a couple of the biggest ones. One, just briefly, I mentioned it before, the misconception that having similar interests will make you a better team couldn't be further from the truth. The more we think the same as everyone else in the group, the more blind spots we'll have, or the less people will speak up because they don't want to deviate from that norm. And so this sort of goes together with kind of one of the big ones that I like to talk about, which is this notion of culture fit. We've been taught that culture fit it's one of the things that leads teams to go from good to great, right? And healthy culture leads teams to go from good to great. But culture fit, I think, is this sort of insidious thing, because we can interpret it as everyone needs to be similar or the same. And this person who's going to provide a skill to the team, but is different than the rest of the team, we shouldn't hire them. is the exact wrong advice. Person who's different is going to add new ingredients. It's that same cake analogy. So one of my mentors years ago, his name's Charlie Kim. He ran a company, or I think still does, called Next Jump, which went from 200 people to like 2 people and then back up to hundreds of people. Had to go through this horrible downsizing, reinvention of the company. Kind of has these amazing stories of just leadership trials and tribulations, and having to do super hard things and persevere and keep going. And this guy helped me out early in my career as an entrepreneur. And he told me, you got to stop thinking of culture fit. Because I came to him with this question of, hey, this is one of my first startups. We've got this team, and I don't know. I have this person I want to hire, but I don't think she's going to fit in because the rest of us are all like 27-year-old men who went to Ivy League schools, and she's coming from a very different place, and she's going to, walk in and I think just not get along. And I don't think she's going to do a good job if she can't get along with all of us. And, and he told me, you got to stop thinking of this culture fit thing as the goal and start thinking of culture add as the goal. And like, yes, she is going to walk in, and she may not even take the job when she walks in and sees, that she doesn't fit. Yeah. But she's going to walk in and have this dynamic that you as a leader need to reinforce, that her adding to the culture is the point and it is what's valued. And then you need to immediately hire someone else who is not like the other 7 guys that you have, and to start to continue to reinforce this. And and he is also very kind. He's like, you hired people, your friends, who are a lot like you. It makes sense. It's how most companies start. It's fine. But deliberately now, you want to look for culture add, not culture fit. And I've kept that, for the last 15 years of, longer than that now, of my career. I've kept that in mind. And it makes, that the topic makes a cameo in Dream Teams, that our goal should be adding new ingredients to the culture. And what makes a good culture is trust and psychological safety. It's people being able to turn their backs on each other, being able to speak freely, being able to have the same conversation with one person that they could have with another person and feel like they're being treated benevolently, or they will be treated benevolently. That is a great culture. Having things that you all aspire to and believe in is great, but different people are going to value different things. So you want to be careful about the kinds of values that you say you all have, not stepping on the personal values or the personal, I think, perspectives or angles that someone could take. Simple analogy, we're talking about designers and engineers. If you're building a website and your designer and your engineer both value page speed over all else, you might get an ugly website that loads really fast. If your designer values user experience and your engineer values page speed, you're going to get a website that will load fast and people will use. And so you don't want to have your culture constrict your potential of what the ingredients can add. I think that's the biggest kind of misconception. And it's a subtle tweak to what we've been taught, but I think it makes all the difference. I think the other one, and I don't touch on this as much in the book, but on that subject of psychological safety and trust, like I get into it, but it's kind of the addendum that, when I do the second edition, I will write into the second edition. It's that psychology research shows us that humans trust, or sort of try to earn trust and try to sort of get others to earn their trust a little bit backwards. We try to prove that we're competent, that we're smart, that we're capable when we're trying to get someone to trust us. And this happens when we're hiring people. We want to see their resume. You're trying to convince someone to work for you. We want to tell them how great of a boss you are, how successful you've been. The second thing, if we're thinking hard about trust, is, integrity, doing what you say you'll do, honesty. We trust people because of that. So it takes time, but if I want you to trust me, I'm going to try to convince you I'm honest. But trying really hard to prove those things and neglecting the one other thing, which is benevolence, sort of undermines trust completely. Benevolence, it turns out, is the thing that makes or breaks trust more than all else. Because if someone is extremely capable, they always do what they say that they'll do, but you don't believe they will be kind to you or treat you well, or you think that they will do something that benefits them over you, even if it means stepping on your head. Doesn't matter if they're honest about that. Doesn't matter if they're extremely capable. In fact, the more capable they are, the worse it is. I call this the Terminator principle. Terminator is good at everything. He also always does what he says he'll do. He's a robot. He says he'll be back, and he came back like 9 times. And yet you wouldn't trust him if he's not on your side because he's there to kill you.
Yeah.
And so that is the thing with teamwork. It's not about convincing each other that we're capable. It's convincing each other that we're going to pull through for the other person, that we care about them. That if we have a disagreement, I'm still going to consider you as a human being, and I'm going to treat you like that. And I'm going to try and work it out rather than use that disagreement to get rid of you or to ignore you or step on your head or whatever else. So those, I think, building trust is about benevolence, and team culture is about what you add, not what you fit.
Interesting aside, I saw an interview with Arnold Schwarzenegger recently. I don't think it was a recent interview, but I saw it recently. And he said that he thought that "I'll be back" was a stupid line. And I think he went to the director and said, we shouldn't do that. And I'll paraphrase here. The director basically said, how about this? I won't tell you how to act. You don't tell me how to write. And so, and he's, of course, now it's the famous line, "I'll be back." So,
yeah.
But he didn't want to say it.
That's funny. Yeah. Do you remember in the interview, did he say he was glad?
He said he was wrong. Yeah, for sure. He said, obviously I was wrong.
That's great. I mean, that is, I think, the other quality of leadership that, I end the book with this intellectual humility thing. Someone who is in a position of power, or, in his case, he was a governor, and, he's like a very popular, anything he says people pay attention to. Even now, just as an actor, like he's a celebrity, admitting that you're wrong, admitting that you changed your mind, admitting that you could be wrong is such a powerful thing for leaders. Like, we have this misconception that the leader needs to be perfect so that other people can aspire to do that and they can be perfect. But actually being adaptable is so much more valuable. And if you give people permission to be wrong, obviously, like, if it doesn't come with confidence to be wrong always and never helpful, that's a different thing than trying to push the team forward. And you roll the dice and you're wrong about that. Giving people permission to do that is so powerful. And if you're the one with the power and you do that, it sets a remarkable tone. So kudos to Arnold. Never thought I'd say kudos to Arnold in a public setting, but kudos to him.
What are some of the dangers of groupthink, and how can we, as a team, proactively avoid that?
Yeah, groupthink is a tough one. The main danger is that you miss something important, right? And it's like we're in a raft and there's a waterfall coming up and we miss it. The second main danger is that someone does see the waterfall and they don't say anything or they don't speak up because the group think they're convinced that there must not be a waterfall because everyone else says there's no waterfall and no one else sees it. So I must be wrong. Sort of this, self-gaslighting thing. But yeah, groupthink is this phenomenon of a group of people. The longer they are together, they work together, the more shared thoughts they have, the more shared opinions they have. And, it's not along every dimension, but say it's a group of people working together. You might like different basketball teams, you might like different TV shows, but you all think that this is the right way to solve this problem forever and ever. And, and the longer you work together and the longer you're successful together, the harder it is for that group to think outside of their own box. And I think there's this sort of funny psychological dynamic to it of when you look around and you see that everyone looks like you can tend to behave like, well, so we all think this thing that I think, right? And especially if you have any kind of power in the situation, or if you're dealing with someone who's shy or feeling powerless, you're not going to get like the pushback of like, well, we don't all think this way every time, right? And that's one of the dangers. If someone does see the waterfall, or they see that mountain that you could climb, but they don't speak up because they're like, well, I guess everyone does think this way. There's more to groupthink than that. And I'm not the world's biggest expert on it. There's been some great books written about it, but that's, I think the crux of it is, okay, so here's where my kind of stuff rolls in on top of the groupthink research. We tend to think, most of us, that it's a failure if the team splits up, or it's a failure if someone has to leave the team, or if a few people leave the team. And the groupthink phenomenon actually, I think, shows us very clearly that might be the only way the team can continue to climb the mountain, is if something changes in that group of people who, we've worked together for a long time and we've now coalesced around a similar set of ways of thinking. We need to inject new thinking. And that might mean someone has to go. It might mean we need to, become comfortable with some discomfort of bringing some different people in. And it might be that, hey, this project is done. So let's disband. And when the next project comes, let's cast a different group of people, some from the last group, some new ones, so that we make sure we don't just solve this next problem exactly the way that we solved the last problem. And so that's the kind of the main thing from my work, is that once you let go that the team has to stay together forever and ever in the same configuration, then it opens up possibilities, and that helps prevent us from devolving into groupthink.
Yeah, just like your hockey example. I mean, the same five didn't play forever, right? You had a new one that came in and got acclimated into the group. I think I've seen some visual studies on there'd be a team in the room and this person would watch everybody pick the wrong thing, and they had the right answer, but they were like, I guess I'm wrong because, and they would know they're wrong, but they would still pick the other one because everybody else had picked it. So, that's the other danger. If we all think the same, maybe that one new person doesn't want to say anything because they're like, clearly I must be wrong. Everybody else has been here and been successful and they're picking the other thing. So I got to pick that one.
Yeah. It would take, in that scenario, I'm familiar with that study. It takes a very specific rebellious personality to say, no, you guys are all wrong and I'm right in a setting like that. And most of us don't have that rebellious personality. I think we need one of those people once in a while on our team. But yeah, it's rare for that to be the natural way that you would respond in that scenario.
Yeah. Now you have so many stories in the book, as I opened up with, you took me on a journey all over. It was amazing. Is there anyone that's kind of your favorite or one that surprised you the most?
Oh, that's my favorite that surprised me the most. Yeah, it really was. It was a journey. I think, I really liked, the story of Malcolm X, which is in the second to last chapter. And his is a story that's been pretty well known. There's a great movie that's been made about him. There's been some great books. I used his story as a vehicle to introduce this idea of intellectual humility. And, the chapter is called How Malcolm Changed His Mind. And I was kind of familiar with the surface level history of Malcolm X and unfamiliar with kind of the deeper history. And there's a scholar named Manning Marable who wrote about his reinventions. I think he actually had a book called The Reinventions of Malcolm X. And what happened in Malcolm X's life is he kind of had two very dramatic personal transformations of his whole belief system. First was, he grew up in sort of a rough upbringing. His house was burned down by the KKK. When he was a kid, his dad was killed. He went to jail. And, he had this, and in jail, I think his nickname was Satan or something like that. He would, a problem kid, you could say, I think he was like 18 when he went to jail. Probably that detail's slightly wrong, but he was a kid still.
Yeah.
And then he converted to religion and sort of changed his life around, stopped, substance abuse and became a fiery preacher who helped a lot of people. And totally transformed his life, became very famous for this kind of period of his life. But what he was doing, and the religion he had was kind of this fundamentalist, religion that was quite advocating of violence and was, there were problems basically with, what he was preaching. And yet there was so much good to what he was helping pull people out of these really hard situations, and became this very famous character, very well known in America. He's on the FBI's radar for like how, dangerous of a thinker and figure he was, public figure. And he was sort of the foil to Martin Luther King, who was, preaching nonviolence and love as how do we, change this horrible situation with race in America and racism in America. And they were sort of these two foils. And then Malcolm X went to Mecca to do the Muslim kind of holy pilgrimage, and he had this second breakthrough where he saw people of all races, all classes, praying together, and they were all the same, kind of all worshiping the same, even though they were all very different. And that kind of broke his brain again, and he then converted to a much more peaceful religion where he sort of took all of this sort of independent, strong, sort of fighter stuff from his past and used it to become a preacher of nonviolence, and that became the Malcolm X that changed the world that everyone knows about. And and his he was sadly murdered, and but he ended up preaching equality in a way that was like amazing and transformative. And his ideas helped shape Martin Luther King's ideas, and I think Martin Luther King helped shape him as well. But learning about how this man with so much anger found religion and changed his life, and then still with anger, but this very prestigious sort of huge following, changed his life again, even though it meant that he would be killed by the people who he'd left behind. Is just super brave, and it points to kind of what I think is sort of the really incredible potential that we have as human beings, which is if we can transcend our current knowledge with something better, and if we can do that despite the odds against us and despite the stakes, that is what leads us to change our lives, but also to change others' lives. Sort of that climbing of the mountain. Malcolm X needed people like Martin Luther King as foils pushing back on the way that he was thinking. He needed other people and how they came together to worship and what they taught him. I'm summarizing his journey in very, very sort of high level, but he needed all of those people to become this reinvented person several times that then would help so many other people. And I think that's what we as leaders need to think about in our lives is, there's a lot at stake if we change our minds in dramatic ways. There's a lot at stake if we transform and upgrade ourselves to new ways of thinking or new ways of doing or being. And often there will be pressure from other people in our in-group to not do that.
Yeah.
And if we can do that, we can teach other people that it's okay to do that. And that's how we get better together. That was probably the most dramatic and eye-opening kind of history lesson I went down in researching this intellectual humility thing, which is about adaptation and growing when growing is hard.
So let me ask, I'm going to see if I can squeeze one or two more questions in before we wrap up. But so how does what we talk about in Dream Teams, is it affected at all by being remote or hybrid, or does it all work exactly the same, whether you're face-to-face or if you work in a remote hybrid environment?
I mean, it's certainly the case that I think you've been hearing me make is that there's a lot of human behavior dynamics afoot with teams that make the difference. And it's a change of dynamic when you're working remotely, when you see each other over a screen, or when you don't see each other, but you're on a screen, hearing each other. Those are different social dynamics. And so, yes, it's different whether we're in person or not. Whether it's better or the same is going to depend on how we navigate those dynamics. So let's say you have the same team and it has all the right ingredients. We have everything to make the chocolate cake. And that team is going to mix together in person at the same office every day, see each other. There's going to be a lot of side conversation and social interactions and nuances that you can cultivate or have, depending on how that, office or, let's call it an office is laid out and structured, right? If, classically Steve Jobs put all the bathrooms at Apple headquarters all in the center of the building, so people from different departments would have to cross paths. There's a design or a thoughtfulness to the office layout that could lead to isolation or intermingling or distraction. If everyone has offices and you never talk to each other, you may as well be remote. That's different than if you have ways to kind of interact and have those small moments, those micro opportunities to include each other or to build trust. When you're fully remote, you have less of that serendipity. So, and you also are losing a lot of the nonverbal, cues that can build trust or help you communicate better. So you just got to work harder to get those things. And I think ultimately it is trust that sort of suffers when we're not face to face. We don't look at each other in the face. We don't have sort of the little conversations to help us see each other as human beings. When you're hybrid, I think you get a good best of both worlds. Again, if you're deliberate, if when you're in person, there is the kind of design and leadership for people to interact and, get to know each other, see each other as human beings without, ruining the workday with just, it's all fun and water cooler chatter. And then when you're over a Zoom screen or you're on Slack or Teams or whatever it is, you're treating each other with that, humanity. That's great. I think that could work very effectively. If you're fully remote or you're mostly remote, as a leader, I think you need to set people up to see each other as human beings and to build that trust. And how you do that is going to be kind of how you conduct those meetings that you have everyone together, how you in the group chats interject and weigh in and encourage things, and those one-on-ones that you have with people and one-on-ones that you encourage people to have with each other. Not every team is working on projects where a lot of that matters. Sometimes you can do your work in isolation and it doesn't. You're just throwing something over to some other team, but most of the time it is the team dynamic that's going to potentially get us further than not. And so, yeah, long story short is the more we can look each other in the face and see each other as human beings, the more trust we're going to have, the more we're going to believe in each other when things go wrong, the more we're going to be able to have those hard conversations, whether they're over Slack or in person. And so that's the goal, is to get people to feel like they're on the same team and they're all humans and not just an avatar.
What's a commonly overlooked trait in great team members?
I think the ability to recognize other people's superpowers and acknowledge that, I think is overlooked, especially if you're not the leader, right? As a leader, like, you might have hired people for their superpowers, but it's not even, I think, like specific skills. It's like, is this person particularly empathetic? Is this person a systems thinker? Is this person, particularly able to lighten the mood, when the mood is tense? Recognizing those things in people and drawing them out. So the person who's empathetic, say you're working on something that's tough, and you're like, hey, we could use that empathy in the room, inviting that person for that reason to like weigh in on something. That ability to kind of recognize that and invite people, I think is underrated. The second thing kind of along with that is the ability to recognize small opportunities to make people feel valued and included. You get into the elevator and you see, your close colleague that you love chatting with, and you chat with them, and there's another person in the elevator that you don't chat with. Recognizing that as an opportunity to bring them in or to greet both people. Some people naturally are great at this, and some people, anyone can do it. Once you start noticing those micro opportunities. But I think it's a really underrated thing, because saying everyone's valued and we want to include everyone and you should speak up and you're here for a reason, saying all that, or building up some big event, like we're having like a big whatever offsite where this is what I want everyone to believe, this thing doesn't work nearly as well as taking 10 opportunities a day to reinforce it by acknowledging people, thanking people, including people, pulling them in. And and that behavior is contagious. So I think that's in sports, you could say it's the player that's the glue player, the player that recognizes this person is great at 3-pointers, so I'm going to pass it to them right now. This person is great at dunks, so I'm going to pass it to them right now, rather than just taking the ball and going for it yourself. Yeah. I think it's totally underrated.
So if listeners can walk away remembering just one idea from Dream Teams, what do you hope it is?
Oh man. There's a problem with this book is it's chock full of ideas.
I know, right? I'm telling you, it's a journey. They should all read it cover to cover, because it's a journey. It's great.
I said the one idea would be, when there is disagreement or conflict or difference of ideas, say, let's explore that. Turn the conflict into a group exploration. Even just the phrase, let's explore that. That's the takeaway.
Yeah.
I think that idea is crazy. Let's explore that.
Yeah, exactly.
I disagree. Let's explore that. That's the number one.
I would never thought of that. Let's explore that.
Exactly.
So what's the best piece of advice you've ever been given?
The best piece of advice I've ever been given. Well, I'll say the thing that comes to mind that's sort of the best piece of wisdom, maybe you could say, comes from my dad. People are more important than stuff. I think the world would be a better place if everyone could repeat that every day.
Yeah.
I find myself repeating that all the time when I'm frustrated, when I'm like, that just costs a lot of money, or this is a big inconvenience. Now I'm going to have to replace that. I have a 2.5-year-old So it's like, you can imagine, like, that thing just broke. There's crayon on the walls. People are more important than stuff.
Yeah.
Is at the end of the day, whether we're talking about family and family life, or we're talking about our team and the people we work with. Yeah, that's the one.
Just so you know, I have an 18 and a 15-year-old, and the stuff gets more expensive, by the way. So,
no!
Sometimes it's hard
no.
to remember. Oh, yeah, he's more important than that switch he just broke. But okay.
Oh no!
Well, Shane, prepared. This has really been great, man. If people want to learn more about you, engage with you, how can they do that?
Thanks for asking. So, shanesnow.com is my website. Kind of find all my stuff to read, stuff to kind of engage with. My contact info's there. I do a lot of public speaking. So I'd say if anyone's listening to this and they have a leadership team or they have a conference, check out my speaking page. I have a new potential book coming up that I have some new stuff I've been writing about. You can find on my site, and I'm speaking about as well. So yeah, that's just my website. It's just my name.
And the book is Dream Teams. Highly recommend it. Working together without falling apart. In the back, he also has some links to different places for resources. So really good stuff here. Really appreciate your time today, Shane. Thanks so much for the conversation.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Thanks for listening to The Conversation. To find out more about Clint, go to clintonmpaget.com and pick up Clint's book, How Teams Triumph, Managing by Commitment, at Amazon. The Conversation with Clinton M. Paget is a production of Forbes Books.